Coming up, ex-Apple design chief Jony Ive's company gets sold to OpenAI. But what does it mean for us blind people?
You're listening to Double Tap, your daily accessible technology show. Now, here's your hosts, Stephen Scott and Shaun Preece.
Hello. Welcome to another episode of Double Tap. Shaun Preece, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm all right, thanks. Move on.
Oh, come on. Not this again. You're not grumpy again, are you?
Well, you know what it is, Stephen Scott?
Oh,
Hello,
tell
listeners.
me, please.
Welcome to our life. Everyone keeps saying, what's the matter with you? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with me, except everyone keeps saying, oh, you sound tired. Oh, you sound grumpy. I'm not grumpy. I'm fine.
Oh, dear. Passive-aggressive.
I'm not passive-aggressive. I think we need a break, Stephen Scott.
We need a break.
It's not me, it's you.
You know, the thing is, every single member of our Double Tap listening audience is saying, yeah, I can get that. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
No, I'm fine. Thank you, Stephen Scott. Please do not worry about
asking.
me. I am fine. Thank you.
Okay, good. I'm glad. I wasn't asking, but that's fine.
All right, good.
Yeah. Look, there's something I want to bring up today.
Of course there is. I know what it is. You know what it is. Even if you haven't said anything, I know what we're going to talk about today.
Well, so Sam Altman, it feels like a beginning of a joke, actually. Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, went to a bar, it would appear, with Jony Ive, who is best known as the creator of, or the designer of the iPhone and the Mac and the MacBook and all these devices over the years. He worked at Apple for 27 years and it was their chief design guy. He left back in 2019. He set up his own company called Love From, which is a nice name, very nice. And he has since been developing new ideas, new concepts, and he's a design guy, right? That's what he does, and that's what his whole thing is.
Beautiful product design. Everyone, basically, the turnaround at Apple was put down to partly at his feet, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the ideas came from some people, but it was actually the execution and the design, the cute, cuddly iMac G3 back in the day that came in all the various colours. Was it Bondi Blue? I remember that one really well.
That's right, yeah. It was a big deal, that.
Yeah, and it had a handle in it. And I remember someone asking him, why does the iMac have a handle? And he said, I just want people to feel like they can go up and touch this thing. They can actually, at a time when computers were beige, they were just big boxes with thousands of cables coming at the back of them, big bulky monitors, all that stuff. Now, of course, or at that point, this was a device that came along and said, hey, this is something that's cute, it's cuddly, you could sit this in your living room, it's not going to look out of place in a living space. Well, I like that. I might keep that for myself. Jony Ive, if you're looking for some marketing people, I can come up with a few things. Where are you? Where there's no table, there's a hable. And
all right,
others.
Stop it.
So he came up with all these wonderful concepts and designs that really made the devices, for many people, just so physically attractive. And it was at a time when, frankly, that was not the common thing. Nowadays we look at these devices, we look at all devices now, and they all have laptops all have a sexiness to them, and people talk about the way that they look and the way they feel, and they're ultra thin and all this stuff. And that is something which he, I think, pioneered. That was not the case before.
I would agree. Yeah, before it was just whatever shape we need to get the hardware in there and to get the functionality that we want. And
the focus was on software. The focus was not really on hardware. But like I say, when Jony was around, that changed. So now he's left Apple, and there was talk of him going back to Apple. There was a few rumors flying around that he would return to Apple at some point. That never materialized, and there's lots of stories as to why that is. And did Apple screw up by missing a chance to work with Jony again? These are all great discussion points, but I think there's a lot more to talk about here. And ultimately, the story that came out yesterday was this story that Jony Ive and Sam Altman are going to be partnering up. So OpenAI is going to buy his company. Now, the company, I'm a bit confused because he set up a company called Love From, but I think he has another company called I.O. And Sam Altman from OpenAI, his company is buying I.O., rather unfortunately timed for this week.
Yes.
Considering Google I/O's just wrapped up.
OpenAI.
OpenAI.
It's getting complicated. It's turning into a nursery rhyme.
Nursery rhyme, exactly. But yeah, Sam's buying this for $6.5 billion.
Let me stop you right there, Stephen Scott. When did $1 billion become a thing? Like, it's just a throwaway. I still remember being shocked at millions being mentioned. Purchased for 40 million. And now it's like, yeah, we bought that for 5 million, 6 billion, 6.5 billion with a B.
Yeah.
That money is incredible.
Well, that's the valuation, I think, mostly on him, I would imagine, because, he brings the ideas to life. I mean, what exactly are they buying at the moment? Well, they're really buying him. So Sam and Jony, both together, put together a video. I don't think they did it themselves. I think they got some other people involved to do this. It's not like a Shaun and Stephen effort.
Yes.
And the video went out on YouTube and on X and various platforms, and it was like a cozy chat. I mean, there was a nice little introduction where it kind of felt, if I'm honest, like I was watching a video where Jony Ive was presenting Sam Altman as the new iPhone. The way it was kind of presented, it was like, he's just kind of, the way he was introduced and, all these fancy shots to kind of introduce Sam in. It was like one of those reality show reveal videos. But in the end, they sat down in a bar, and whether or not any of this is real or not, or green screen, who knows? Probably the whole thing's made up, who knows? But the point is that, they had a conversation about how they're going to work together and what they're going to do. Now, look, I'll be honest, the video in and of itself is interesting. It whets the appetite as far as you're learning about the partnership. But that's all we're learning about. I mean, it was very clear that it was a video announcing that one day soon there will be an announcement. And that announcement will be hardware from OpenAI. Now, this is not new. That part is not new. We knew that OpenAI were looking to develop hardware. They would be fools not to. But I think there's a bigger question here. And that is, what is this going to look like? What is it going to mean? And having Jony Ive on board, does it change things? Because look, I've seen the comments already on X, and I've seen various comments across social media from people saying, look, we saw this already. We've seen this movie before. We saw two people who came from Apple with an idea to develop, some kind of AI device. Like something quite, something very friendly to humans, kind of a humane type of device.
Yes.
And then they sort of got together and presented it to the world in a very cozy video, and everyone thought, okay, this is interesting. This might be the future. And, that's gone down the pan pretty quick. In fact, HP owns it, which means it definitely has gone down the pan. No one's interested now. So, does Jony Ive bring something different here? So, I want to start there. What's your thoughts, Preece?
Yeah, well, of course they bring something different. They bring their reputations, right? OpenAI started this whole AI wave, and ChatGPT, despite the progress of the others, it's still regarded, I suppose, as, the leader. It's been pretty quiet recently, but people still look to them as to what's coming next. There's a lot of excitement of the next major update to ChatGPT, what it's going to be able to do. I know there's a lot of focus on Gemini and the others as well, but I think OpenAI have that reputation as the granddaddies of AI, and Jony Ive has exactly the same when it comes to product design. So they're bringing their reputations, and there is a trust there. Of course, look, as you mentioned, humane, which is absolutely right to do, because they did kind of go off their ex-Apple connection as well. And because of that, it automatically brings some amount of expectation with that. But in this case, I mean, because they're both leaders in the field, I would argue that, Humane came at this as newcomers. Even if they had some background, they still came at AI and product design as newcomers, and obviously it fell over. But in this case, I've got lots of expectation that this could be really, really interesting. And you mentioned the video that they put out was interesting. I mean, more than that, weren't you excited when he said, you know what? Jony gave me a device a few weeks ago, and I've been using it at home.
Yeah,
and it's amazing. And he mentioned the way that we use current technology, and it just seems legacy. If I want to use ChatGPT now, said Sam Altman, I need to go to a laptop, go to the website, type in the thing, wait for the response, and it just feels like this isn't the best way to use this technology. And what we want to produce is hardware that does it in a different way, a new shift really in technology. I'm excited by this. It could turn out just to be, hey, we got a ChatGPT smart speaker. Either way, though, with those two big giants in AI and product design, it's going to be interesting.
You say just another ChatGPT speaker, though. I mean, there isn't a ChatGPT speaker. First off, I mean, I was talking to someone the other day about how fast this industry is moving. Like, who's talking about Lady A Plus, right? No one's talking about it. They haven't really released it far and wide enough yet, I think, for people to actually use it. But no one's even talking about it.
There's only a couple of demos of it on YouTube, and they are not impressive, to say the least. And apparently they're already pulling back on some of the promises that were given. And some of the features are not going to be there. So it's not looking good.
That's interesting. I haven't seen those videos. That's interesting.
Yeah, not great.
I mean, look, where are we going with this ultimately? Because I think you're right. I mean, you've kind of nailed it there. This is a very different proposition, actually. I think I'm looking at this differently now because, you're right. With Humane, it was two people who had the name behind them.
Yeah.
But that was kind of it, right? They had the name of Apple, the company. I know people that worked at Apple, right? I mean, anyone can say they worked at Apple. But it doesn't mean you're going to become the next Steve Jobs or the next Jony Ive, right?
Yeah.
So, that doesn't mean anything. What it ultimately you have to get your credentials out there. You have to, stand on your own 2 feet. And Humane never managed it. But it's different because Sam Altman has a proven product and Jony Ive has proven success in what he's done. So you're right. It's a different thing. Some have even compared it to. There's an image flying around the internet of a black and white image of both Jony Ive and Sam Altman together, and someone saying this is very reminiscent of the old days of Steve Jobs and Jony Ive together. It feels like that kind of partnership again, because when that partnership happened, great things happened. Do you think it can be replicated again?
Well, anything is possible. I think that, look, this is a new product, and who knows, it could fall over. I doubt it. I think they've taken their time over this. I think OpenAI as a company could have gone into hardware production a long time ago, but they've taken their time and chose Jony Ive specifically. So there must be some reason for that. I think there's two main points here, going off that video that I saw in the announcements. Firstly, I am really intrigued as to what the device is going to be. And they also mentioned devices as well. So this isn't just a one thing. I was thinking, okay, what's the first thing they're going to release? Is this glasses? Is this going to be a watch? Is this, as I said, a smart speaker? I don't know. I have no idea. But, Sam apparently is using one right now. What is that new device going to look like? And secondly, what does that mean for us? And
big question.
Because AI is proving to be the thing, right? That is the thing that's going to be driving everything. I mean, Microsoft recently announced at Build 2025 that Windows, they're adding MCP support, which is all about AI being able to control apps and your system. So basically, it's giving it almost an API, a way to control your Windows system. Any AI you want to use, it can control your settings, your apps, your websites, whatever it may be. So AI is going to be the driving force behind everything moving forward. And again, I hate to keep, droning on about this, but Apple and Apple Intelligence, it's a scary time. I'll be honest, I'm worried here. Unless something really significant happens at WWDC, how are they ever going to catch up?
I want to talk about that. That's why I kind of wanted to talk about this for the hour, because I think there's so many aspects to this to discuss. Let's start with devices. So I think this is where OpenAI has got a real shot, because this is the moment for them really to develop something totally new, a whole new way of using technology. Not using a computer necessarily, not even using a phone necessarily. Just a whole new way of interacting with technology and bringing together ChatGPT in its current form and what it's going to be in the future. But, thinking of live vision, thinking of, being able to have a conversation, captioning, live text, essentially all the elements are there for anybody to use this, right? I mean, it has that potential that anybody, no matter what their ability or disability is, they would be able to use this. Now, I know we're not quite there yet. We're certainly not there yet because we're using legacy devices to access it. And I can't believe I'm saving legacy devices, but, that's
keyboard.
What we're kind of now. Yeah, keyboard, mouse. What is this, 1995? But that's kind of where we're at, right? We're kind of having that conversation now. We're having that discussion that says maybe there is a world without a keyboard, without a mouse, without some kind of interaction that, absolutely could have switch control or, assistive control or whatever it might be in order for someone who's disabled to use it. We'll get to whether or not that could happen with OpenAI or not, and who knows. But I think, it's quite an exciting time because it essentially frees AI to do what it is good at, which is to give you information in an easy to understand way. And, I keep going back to the smart speaker and Lady 8. Okay, forget Plus and forget even the future. Think about where we started with that. The ability to say, play me some songs by Frank Sinatra, it understanding me and it playing those songs. That alone blew my mind back then, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And that was the beginning of it. And then, of course, it was like, right, okay, can I send an email with this thing? Well, no, because it needs integration and that doesn't work very well. And can I do shopping on it? Well, it's not great at that. But just look at InnerSearch, who we've talked about. Look at how they've developed a phone number that you can call, and you can have a conversation with an AI agent and order products through that. I mean, it's not just browsing. I mean, you can do that, but you can purchase. And just with conversation. So, they've gone further than even Amazon have gone with this in a very short space of time. So you see how quickly things are moving. You see where we're at today. I mean, I'm already seeing people saying in a decade, the computers you're sitting in front of now will not be what we use. This is not how we will do things. And there was a time I would have thought, and I've heard the story about the demise of the keyboard and the demise of the mouse and the demise of the computer. And I've always thought, nah, it's not happening. But I think AI is the path away from all of that. And it's the implementation that's going to be interesting. How are we going to... Because at the moment, I don't think we can understand it. It's like, right, okay, I can kind of understand the shopping thing. I can kind of understand, it's going to have some kind of Face ID or some kind of Touch ID so that if I want to access my bank, I can have a conversation with my bank and check my transactions and send money. I get that. But, like I want to edit a video. How do I do that using AI? But we're starting to see the answers to that, right? We're starting to see how that will work. That you're literally having a conversation with your device, whether that be through a keyboard, whether that be through switch control, whether that be through audio, whether that be verbally or whatever it might be. Kind of starting to see how this is all coming together. We saw it in Google with Gemini.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just going to say. Yeah, we can see all these separate projects coming together and sort of making an ecosystem now. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I think there's going to be, look, I don't want to get too futuristic here, because there is going to be a long transition period, till we reach the, throw those keyboards and mice away.
Absolutely. Look, exactly. Keyboards are not going anywhere anytime soon.
No, of course not. And there's always going to be, those, yes, maybe there's I think the device is going to be, I'm going to put a prediction out there. I think it's going to be a smart speaker with a screen, with a display, a smart display, because I think they're going to be very much into giving it that futuristic, almost an avatar assistant, giving a personality or a character for your assistant. And, image creation, that video creation that they showed at Gemini I/O is going to be another, being able to do things like that and send it email. I think it's going to be a smart speaker with a screen. But I think you're absolutely right. It's going to have a huge impact, as the smart speaker did, as the, either Google Nest or what was it called at the time? I can't even remember now.
Google Home was just
Google Home. That was it. Yeah, or the Lady A device. How that it just really got into the mainstream. It took technology just into everyone's hands. I think this is going to do the same.
And, the other thing you have to remember here is we're talking about OpenAI today, but in 5 years, there'll be others. There'll be other players in the market. There'll be others pushing to do this. Once this appears to be something that is stable, reliable, and trustworthy, and those are really key words in all of this, because as we've said many times on this show, AI at the moment is not that trustworthy. You have to correct it. You have to check it.
Yep.
You can't be sure it's giving you the answer. I mean, sometimes it gives you the answer it thinks you want rather than the answer you actually want. And that's dangerous, right? So at the moment, the AI has a lot of fine-tuning to be done. And that is something which OpenAI are obviously working hard on, as are Google and others. But it does raise some interesting questions, because this will be the first time. This will be the first time. I mean, forget the Human AI Pin or the Rabbit R1. You could say those were the first. I don't know if I would. I don't know if I'd go so far to say that. I think these were promises. I think these were conduits to using the ChatGPT functionalities. But
they never delivered. They simply did not work. I'm sorry, they just didn't work.
But I think it's this device will be more than just a conduit to it. Like, I mean, right now, for example, we can go into our PC and we can, if you've got a Copilot key on your computer, you can press that, or you can do Alt Space if it's set up as the shortcut, and you can get straight into Copilot and you can talk to your Copilot. You're doing it all the time, as am I. And, to me, that's the device is the conduit to it. But the question is, what is that device they're building going to be and going to do that's going to be different to that? I think that's the first question, right? What does that look like? What does it achieve?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. I don't
know. No, I don't either.
Until we see it. And, what form it will come, I think ultimately it's going to come in every form. It'll come in a smart speaker form. It may come in a wearable, glasses. I think it'll probably do all of that stuff. And then, of course, you have to ask yourself the question, how much money does Apple have in the bank, right? Could they not just buy all this? Could they just buy OpenAI and IO and just be like the giant shark, just eats all the other fish and just does it? Because honestly, here's my thing. I am genuinely concerned today about where Apple's going. And I'm not going to go as far as some who have said Apple is dead after even after Google I/O.
Yes.
Even me, the Apple fanboy I am, was sitting there thinking, this is all way ahead of Apple. The promises that are being made, even the stuff they're saying is coming soon and isn't even here yet, is way ahead of Apple.
Well, it's easy to promise something that's better than anyone else's. It's what you've got right now. But even what you've got right now is not even a patch.
I was going to say, I mean, even if you just say, right, well, okay, do you know what do we have right now? I've got live video on my Samsung S25. I can have conversations with it. I've got the Gemini assistant built in to the device. It's there. I mean, no doubt there's work that needs done on it to improve itself, but it's certainly far ahead. I mean, where am I at with Apple Intelligence? It can't set an alarm properly. It doesn't know who to call when I ask it to call someone. It doesn't even remember I've got the person in my contacts. I ask it for the date. It gets confused. I mean, that to me, it's not Apple is dead. Siri is dead, right? Siri is dead. Let's just go there and say that first. Apple need to sort this. Now, can they pull a rabbit out of the hat at WWDC this year? I mean, I have to tell you, I think they have to pull a rabbit out of the hat.
I agree. I think they need to show a strong response.
If they don't talk about improving, I mean, do you know what the best thing they could do? And they'll never do this. The best thing they could do is say, do you know what, guys? This has not been good. This is bad, and we need to fix it.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
I know, but I think that would be a good place to start. Acknowledge the reality. Don't if they get up on stage and start going on about how Siri's the greatest because you get 8 million interactions a minute or whatever it is, just stop that nonsense. I want someone to stand up in the middle of that video, like everyone seems to do during a Microsoft event, stand up and start yelling something. Well, stand up and start yelling. Look, you're talking rubbish. It's not good. It's terrible.
Please don't disrupt any events. That's not double-tap advice.
I say this because I like Apple. And I'm going to talk more about this in a minute, because I think there's another side to this story that you will only hear on this program and shows like this, where we're talking to blind people and we're talking about the issue from a blindness perspective. We'll get to the accessibility side in a minute.
Yes.
But I think that there must be deep concern. Unless they've got something they're ready to pull out of their hat, there must be deep concern within Apple right now, which is, look at where everything's going, look at the speed of where everything's going, and then now this merger between I.O. and OpenAI, so Jony Ive's company coming into OpenAI, it just feels like such a slap in the face to Apple. And it's not, but it must feel that way. Like, what is coming next?
Listen, the thing that they've got going for them, OpenAI and the I.O. company with Jony Ive, is that, I don't know, I think people are seeing the sci-fi movies coming to life. That's what people are imagining. You know, that movie Her, with that artificial intelligence, you know, in a pair of earbuds, and just being able to have a conversation, which we're so excited about. It's the LLM, that large language, excuse me, the large language model, being able to talk to the technology is a thing that grabs people's imaginations. And I think they're going to play on that. So where does that leave accessibility is the next question, I think. And
yeah, well, look, you get yourself a little drink there.
Thank you, I will.
You've got that frog in your throat, and I don't want you to croak it. Thank you. So stick around. This is Double Tap. We'll be back to talk about the accessibility side of this story next. Double Tap thanks Pneuma Solutions for supporting this podcast and for their continued commitment to digital accessibility. Pneuma Solutions is behind some of the most powerful accessibility tools out there, all designed by blind developers who understand the real-world challenges of inaccessible tech. Whether it's Remote Incident Manager, or RIM, which lets you give or receive fully accessible remote tech support across PC and Mac, or Scribe, which turns inaccessible meeting documents into screen reader-friendly files instantly, Pneuma is solving real problems with smart, usable tools. They're not just building the products, they're building independence to go along with them. At Pneuma, they believe access to information is a right, not a privilege, and that is why we're excited to celebrate our partnership with a special offer just for the Double Tap community. Use code DT20 for $20 off any new purchase or the first billing cycle of a subscription. And they're giving away 10 free community support subscriptions for Remote Incident Manager and 10 Scribe for Documents subscriptions as well. You can experience seamless tech support and real-time document remediation completely accessibly. Subscribe to our newsletter at doubletaponair.com/subscribe for your chance to win and stay up to date with everything they're working on. Okay, let's talk about the accessibility side of this story. Why is I.O., Jony Ive's company, and OpenAI getting together making me nervous around accessibility? Well, here's my thoughts on this. And I've been thinking about this a lot overnight, which is why I wanted to bring all this up today.
I like that his thoughts are not a rant so far. So okay.
Yeah, no, I've been thinking about this because, look, I think we're in a very interesting time. And like you said earlier, and, you know, I say this, it's important to say this actually, you know, there's not going to be any major changes happening here, right? It's not like, you know, if Apple doesn't say Siri's going to be amazing next year, that's it, we're doomed and you have to chuck your iPhone in the bin. No one's suggesting that. We're nowhere near that, right? But I think it is important to sound some alarm, especially from our community, because if Apple were to even fall into third place behind OpenAI, behind Google, whatever order that ends up in, and maybe behind others who, you know, are climbing up the ladder. I mean, you look at Claude from Anthropic. From an AI perspective, they're way ahead. Yeah, they're way ahead of the game. Again, further ahead than Apple, and I don't know where they stack up next to the other two, but there are other companies out there doing this as well. There's a lot of companies that are involved in this. They're all in this AI race at the minute. But let's say that, you know, okay, so Apple fall behind and that's it. You know, it looks like they're kind of doomed. And we start to see sales fall. And over time, and we're talking probably a decade, we start to see those sales fall to a point where, you know, it's looking like it's Apple's no longer the flavor of the month. It's no longer the choice. It's no longer dominant in the market. It starts to fall out of people's favor. I think, what people will often forget is, in amongst all this, how important and vital Apple have been in making technology accessible to us disabled people. And yes, other companies have followed on. No doubt, Google have done a huge amount of work and a huge amount of great work. Have they done as much, though, as Apple? I don't think so.
And would it have happened as quickly as it did without Apple?
I wonder. I don't think it would. So. No, I don't think it would have. I don't think it would have gone as far. It certainly wouldn't have gone as far. We may have seen something, but it would have. I imagine a world would. The world I imagine, right, would be that it would have been accessible by a third party. You would have a Freedom Scientific or whoever made Talks back in the day.
Yeah.
That would be the developer of the software that would allow you to use your phone, but it would be some kind of,
voiceover by Code Factory.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
Yeah.
I could see that. That's probably where it would end up. So
and
you kind of think, well, what happens then, right? I mean, where do we get to at that point? So, let's say that happens, right? Let's say that is the end result, that Apple are falling away. We're now in a position where these new companies are not investing as much in accessibility. We're having the new fights all over again. I said this probably, I want to say 10, maybe even 15 years ago, that we can't be complacent about accessibility.
No.
I remember doing a show once, actually, and I think it was about 15 years ago. I remember saying, a day may come where we don't have accessibility in a device anymore. It could just fall away. And I was talking at the time about Apple, because you can't be guaranteed of anything. A new CEO might be coming in soon, will be coming in soon to Apple, may have a totally different set of priorities. May want to change direction entirely. Might be looking at this situation and saying, we really need to change things. And accessibility just falls off the cliff.
Well, yeah.
These are realities, right? This could happen.
People's attitudes and government attitudes can change towards anything, as we know. So there's no guarantees anywhere. But and also,
well, we thought we had secure rights around being disabled, right? We thought that was fairly certain. We fought. Well, I say we. I mean, many others before us fought bloody hard to get these rights that we hold so dear. But how quickly that can fall away with the change of a government.
Yeah.
And that's not, and I'm not pointing at one in particular before you start sending in the hate. I'm not pointing at one in particular.
No.
I'm pointing around the world, because a lot of them are following suit.
Yeah.
It kind of shows the attitudes of disability don't change. They really don't change. It's the unfortunate reality of disability. Nothing much has changed in the last 40 or 50 years. People talk about attitudes changing. We must change attitudes. Yeah. How's that going?
Any minor, I would say, minority demographic can become the scapegoat for when things don't go great as a society. So, yeah, whatever. But let's not get into that. But the point is that no one would have thought that Nokia would disappear, right?
No,
back in the day,
right.
Nokia was it, and the BlackBerry, exactly the same. They they owned it, and whatever big company that just seemed to rule the whatever segment they were ruling over. You could say the same thing, but no one lasts forever. And you have got to think about that. And look, when Apple brings out a new product, we have a reasonable expectation of accessibility. I can't say that for any other company. So no matter what you think about, and we've had our criticisms of voiceover and the bugs that may still be there, and some of the inconsistencies. But at the same time, you do have to say we have that expectation of accessibility in new products that they bring out because it's Apple. And that is, I don't know, that's very special. I don't know any other companies that do that.
And, the way to get round this, ultimately, is to have dialogue early and hope that, and it is hope, to be honest, that, and I know people say, well, there's legislation, there's regulations and all that stuff, but I think we've all agreed that, I think we can all agree now that even those regulations, even those guarantees that we thought were enshrined in law may not be worth the lawyery paper they're written on.
Yeah.
Because
money talks louder than legislation, I'm afraid. It's a worrying time. Any new product comes out, and look, let's be fair, because I'm talking about OpenAI and IO, which I know nothing about that company, by the way. So let's stick with OpenAI. The reputation behind it, the reputation when it comes to what AI can do is second to none. What is their reputation when it comes to accessibility? I mean, the ChatGPT website wasn't accessible for quite a while, or it wasn't great. I mean, we watched the Google I/O event a couple of days ago, and Carrie Morales tried out the AI mode in the browser, and it wasn't labeled. I mean, we're talking about cutting, bleeding edge technology when it comes to AI. This is the future, and yet those accessibility things are still being missed. They're not even... I mean, surely AI can just do that straight away before it puts anything out. Surely. But no, they were still having these accessibility problems, these oversights, these just being ignored. That brings up many warning signs and red flags for me.
And at the root of all of this, and especially in these new companies, these new AI companies, there's a sense, I think, if you talk to any of them, and I haven't talked to any of these people, but I would imagine that their response to the question around accessibility would be, well, ultimately AI can solve that issue, right? Because if it can detect an unlabeled button, it can tell you what that button is. And of course, we're talking about, I mean, if you're talking about OpenAI and I/O, I mean, they're kind of redesigning, reimagining the whole thing. There won't be buttons to click. There won't be elements on the screen, because ultimately the whole thing will be conversational, or in some other way you'll be interacting with it, which will be far more easier, in quotes, to use. Sam Altman mentioned in the video that he doesn't want this to be just for the nerds and the people who really understand this stuff. He wants it to be for everyone. I do like that sentiment, but it has to mean more than just, it means we can all now make videos of cats jumping up and down, or...
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's just words. I mean,
well,
so far their
absolutely.
actions haven't proved any commitment to accessibility at all. They just haven't. The accessibility, yes, look, the web page, the ChatGPT website has improved from the start, where the screen reader was very difficult to use with it. And okay, it's not so bad now. That's fine. But I mean, I don't see that as a commitment. I just don't. And I've got no trust that there's even any thought to accessibility right from the off.
Well, and the danger is, if we wait until whatever product is launched, we're just back to where we always are.
Yeah,
which is we're trying to fill in the holes.
Hello, remember us? Can we use this?
I mean, Humane, the same thing, right? I mean, how many times I got in touch with the people at Humane to say, can we sit down and talk about accessibility? Can we talk about this? And I would get lovely messages back. Of course, let's discuss this. Let's talk. And then, other companies gone down the drain, so forget that. Didn't get any response. No meaningful response. No commitments. And even if you did get, commitment, let's be honest, what would it be? Oh, well, we'll look into it. Yeah.
Well, would it?
Sorry, that's not even. That's just not good enough.
Can we reach out to Sam? Do you think Sam would talk to us?
I'd love to hear. I would love to get him on the show, because I think that's the central question for me. Right? The central question is, this has to be. This is such an opportunity for a company like them to turn around and say, we're not just putting everything into this to make it the best experience. We're going to make sure it's the best experience for everybody. And we're going to work with X group, Y group, Z group, across disability, across every ability and disability, to think about that from the ground up.
Yeah.
Do I think it's going to happen? No. Not at the moment. But
Sadly
it needs to be. But this is why we need to have this conversation. This is why this has to be. We need to debate this more in public. We need to talk about it more. We need to be at the forefront of this conversation, and we need to make sure that we as disabled people are somehow getting involved in the discussion. Now, it does come down to who he's surrounded by, and often is the case in companies. This is not unique to Sam Altman. It's not unique to OpenAI. It's not unique to any company in the world. If you don't have disabled people in the room, disability is not brought up, and if it is, it's a version of disability that people imagine, which is, we're all incapable, or we can't do anything, and, how would this work for us? And there's a real danger here.
Yeah.
And this is why, the warning sounds from me, because, and there's nothing I can do about it. If everyone walks away from Apple, well, there's nothing I can do or say about it. That's it. It's done. But what are we left with as disabled people, as blind people? What are we left with? We're in a world where then accessibility is now in hands. Our devices. We're back to the day of the iPhone launch, ironically, right? Back to the day of the iPhone launch,
yep.
when we had no idea if we'd ever be able to use one.
And
certainly at that time, we couldn't.
That's exactly the point. Sam and Jony are sort of, I know them intimately. That's why I just use their first names, Sam and Jony, are sort of portraying this. This is a change. They mentioned legacy technology. Like, this is the new wave. This is the new way of computing. Well, if that's the case, then there should be a commitment there, right? If this is a new way, then let's make accessibility in from the ground floor, as you just said. When the touch screens came in on the phones, we talked about this many times, but, there was that nervousness. We are going to be left out of this. And it wasn't until someone showed, Apple showed that it could be done, that actually you could use a screen reader without any buttons. And we were invited to the party. And I just think... are we really here? When we're talking about AI, it does sound so futuristic, but are we really back to, 20 years ago when I was ringing companies up and asking about accessibility and they just didn't know what I was talking about at all? I don't want to go back to those days. I really don't.
Which seems so alien an idea because you think where we are at today. But this cannot be the peak of top accessibility. This can't be it. It really cannot be. We can't be at a point where this is it, and it's we've had the gigantic mountain we've climbed, we've got here, and now we're back on the way down again. I really cannot. I really hope that is not what
we hope not. But the trouble is, there will be people now thinking, and when smart speakers came out, people with speech difficulties, hearing difficulties, in exactly the same thing, feeling that nervousness. Well, I can't take part in this. Yeah,
we've seen this before. This is, it's easy for people to say, and they will say, well, you're being very negative, Stephen. Let's see what actually comes out first. Yeah, okay, fine. But show me examples beyond Apple that have come out that have been accessible from the ground up. There's only one device I can think of, and I'm going to be specific here, for blind people, okay? There's only one device I can think of that when it came out, I saw true inclusive design, including blind people. Now, actual true inclusive design came later, but for blind people, it was obvious, and that was the Amazon Echo. The first time I saw something where I could ask anybody, how do you get your device to do that? And they would tell you, I just ask it to play this or do this or add that or turn this on or whatever. And it worked the same way as everyone else's did. I didn't have to go to a special manual or use a special screen reader or any of that stuff. It was all built in. Now, that changed in terms of people who were deaf later, and that became more inclusive at that point, because then you had other ways to interact with the device. So, I can be hit on that from it wasn't truly inclusive at the start. I get that. That came later. But I think from just purely from that blind perspective, I could buy that device, I could set it up, and I could have it running, and it was the same commands I was giving that everybody else was giving. And I thought, that's it. This is good. This is really good. We're getting somewhere here. And I hope that's what AI becomes. I hope that's where we end up with AI.
Yeah. But
that's the dream.
As we've said before, when it comes to the smart speaker, wasn't it accessibility by accident? I mean, was that planned? Or was it just because the interface was an audio interface that, hey, blind people can use that? Were they surprised by that themselves, or did they suddenly think?
Look, I'll be honest, Shaun. I really despair to say this, but I think all of it is shock. I think when anybody finds out that blind people, frankly, do anything, they're surprised.
Yeah, possibly.
I still live in a world where people do not understand how I use a smartphone, do not understand how I use a computer. I worked with a guy for the best part of 15 years who knew I used a screen reader and could not understand how I could read the text on my screen because it was so small. And I said, but I don't read my screen. The computer speaks out what I see or what it sees, and I hear it. And he said, and again, he worked with me for 15 years. This wasn't a stranger. This wasn't someone I didn't know particularly well. I worked beside him every day. And he still turned around to me and said, I don't understand how you can see the text.
Yeah.
I don't know what you do with that. That's the reality that we live in. These are people who know you who still don't get it. How do you expect people who don't have a clue? So when it comes to accessibility, and of course this is another debate in this world of what is accessible, right? What is accessibility? This word that flies around means so many things to different people.
No, we've had the discussion about can anything be fully accessible before. There's no such thing as fully accessible.
I went to a restaurant, it had a Braille menu. And I was like, okay, that's great. And they even said, we've got a large print menu. Fantastic. Was that restaurant there for fully accessible? No. Do you know why? Because they had no ramp to get in.
Yeah.
So, they had 3 steps outside the restaurant and a Braille menu and a large print menu. Great for blind people. If you're in a wheelchair, can't get in. So, there are so many issues here for people to wrap their heads around to know what inclusive design looks like. But the key component of it is it has to be thought about from the start, and disabled people have to be in the room. It doesn't work otherwise. It just cannot work. And we always end up in the same place, which is outside at the door begging for the scraps.
Yeah. Here's the product we've just made. Can you use it? No? Okay, we'll work on that later on. Yeah, let's do that before. Let's do that from the ground up. Do you know what? You're right. It sounds like we're being really negative, but honestly, I'm excited by this announcement. I want to see these new devices. I want to use AI 100%. As I use my smart speaker, but with the AI power behind it. I want to use all that stuff. I think these are reasonable questions, though, because if this truly is a new wave of how we use technology, then we have got to be vocal about this from the very beginning. And not shout and stamp our feet, but say, you do know that, we need to use this stuff. Have you forgotten about it? And as I say, I think that so far the commitment to accessibility from all of these AI companies, when it comes to the AI specifically, they haven't been great. There's been problems, screen reader access or the apps or whatever it may be. There's been issues there, and it just feels like it's almost an afterthought for accessibility. And when it comes to this new wave of technology, you can't do that. We won't be left out of this. I'm sorry, I just won't.
Yeah, I mean, look, I feel comfort when I hear companies like Waymo talk about accessibility, and they actually, are involved with people who are disabled, and they talk about how driverless car technology is going to be, so enabling for so many people, not just the drunks on a Saturday night, but, people who actually, want to get around, go places independently, spend time alone with their own thoughts. I think about a lot of people who have autism, for example. And, I'll be honest, I didn't know a lot about autism for a long time, but I'm learning more about it through friends and family who have autism and relations with people who have autism. And I've been learning a lot about it. And one thing that comes up quite a lot of time is routine and having things happen in a certain order in a certain way. You book a taxi, for example, and that taxi doesn't turn up. It says it's going to turn up at 4:10, but actually it turns up at like 4:30. Mm-hmm. That can throw someone who's autistic completely off, and it can create a whole chain of events that destroys that person's day.
Yep.
If you can have technology which can guarantee you that it will be there because it's all programmed in such a way that it knows exactly where it is and it knows how.
Or at least we can track it.
Yeah, we can do that with Uber anyway. But the point is that it's in a different world where every car is essentially driverless. Then they're in much more control of where they are and how they get around, and you're less likely to be stuck in traffic jams, right? So all these things, all these issues start to resolve themselves. And that's good, and I'm glad these conversations are happening. But I worry about the fact that none of these conversations are happening at the moment. Now, there is a little bit of hope in that we have Mike Buckley. And I don't mean to pin it all on Mike, but, we've got Mike Buckley from Be My Eyes.
We are pinning everything. Come on, Mike, sort it out.
And if you're looking for something, if you're looking for some glimmer of hope in all this, remember that OpenAI reached out to Mike and said, let's work together. Let's do something here. And that's interesting, right? Right at that early stage, right pretty much months after the launch of ChatGPT, and Be My AI was in production. And that's interesting because that shows an interest in working with the community. And that's what we're looking for. That's stage one, getting us in the door.
True.
Now it's up to us to use that opportunity and use it well. And let's not, and look, for the advocates who love to stamp their feet and throw, legal cases around and throw lawsuits around. It's not the time for that. It's a time for good, decent, honourable communication. We're at a very early stage of this. Let's not screw this up. Let's not sound like a bunch of demanding children. Yes, we do want to be included. We want to be part of the conversation. We want to be using these devices, but we can have that conversation in a civilized way.
I agree.
And I think that there's a danger that immediately, I can hear it now. I hear it from the same people all the time. Well, we must set up a lawsuit and we must send in the army. No, we're not doing that this time. Because no one's going to pay any interest to that.
Well, not this stage anyway.
You've got to look at the bigger picture, guys, right? The bigger picture is disability is something that is being treated very badly. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Disabled people are being treated very badly at the moment, and we're being talked about very badly. And a lot of the conversations that are being had in private about disabled people are very unpleasant. Okay? Yes. Let's get real about this. That's what's going on. And it's the same in the same way that people now feel it's okay to be racist again. They're now saying the very things about disabled people, which they were probably saying anyway. Because, ableism, as it stands, never really went away. And it didn't even hide itself particularly well. But like racism, like sexism, like misogyny, all these things, it's now just up for discussion, up for debate. We can have a laugh about it. I hear the R word in parlance now again. And I'm like, really? That's okay again? Wow.
Yeah.
So if that starts to seep into society, we've got a problem. And it will all feed into these issues, all feed into this. So, look, I just wanted to talk about this for the hour because I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting discussion. It's on my mind because the world is concerning me right now in many, many ways, not just unique to disability. In many ways, the world is a terrifying place right now. But if you are disabled, it is a little bit more terrifying than perhaps it might be for some people. And that's fair to say. Okay? I think when it comes to technology, I don't want to be in a position when they launch this new product where they say, oh yeah, we'll get to accessibility at some point down the line. Because actually, if AI is working the way it should work, and it's doing things properly, it kind of should build itself in, right? I mean, it's almost like it should be able to be trained to just understand and learn and, all these models are being built. I mean, maybe that's the way to look at it. Maybe I'm missing the point here. Maybe at the end of the day, with the large language models and the work we had from Troy Ottilio, of course, yesterday, he was talking about how they're building these models for the visual interpreter. Once these models are built, I mean, he's saying, in an interview he had with us yesterday, he said it's not going to be part of the mainstream Gemini large language model yet. So essentially, if you want to use the visual interpreter model, you need to use Ira for that. You can't just, call up Gemini Live and you'll get the same responses. It's going to be more detailed via Ira, okay? So is that what the hope is? Is it actually that it's down to the developers to develop into the AI the language, the modeling, in order for it to understand us in our way? So it's like a new app development phase, essentially.
It's difficult, though, because we don't know how this technology is going to work. When we're talking about the OpenAI devices here, we don't know what the interface is going to be. We don't know if there's like a web portal interface for setting it up. We don't know anything. It is new. So we don't even know what the accessibility issues could be yet. It's so many unknowns.
I'll say one thing. I can almost predict one thing, though. We go back to the start when we talk about Jony Ive and when he developed a number of different things he developed over the years, but one in particular was, of course, the iMac and the classic iMac G3 with the handle. One thing that Jony likes is for people to touch his devices. So whether it's a smart speaker, whether it's something that sits on a desktop or sits on a table, you're going to want to touch it because Jony likes you to touch it. So the question is, what does that mean? Does that have any influence in how the design works? Or is it just going to be a smart speaker with a handle? Who knows? Who knows?
We don't know, but very interesting times. We just wanted to flag up those concerns, and I think we're right to do so. I hope that the sight loss organisations out there, the CNIB, NFB, ACB, whoever it may be, actually, they get in contact and they do make our voices heard.
Not with lawsuits, though.
No, but just to say, let's talk about accessibility on this new technology that's coming. Let's make it all inclusive.
Yeah, I mean, look, a day may come where we'll have to reach for a lawyer and say, hey, it's time we need to get into this. But that should not be the initial conversation. Please don't make that happen, because honestly, you'll destroy it. You'll destroy any chance of any goodwill. And it's not, I know the argument about, well, it's not about goodwill. It's about, I get it. I understand that. I get it's meant to be there. I get we should all have it. But also we can have civilized conversations to get us to the same place. It is possible. So please, let's do that first. But it is really exciting. It is an exciting time. And I know it sounds terrifying and I made it sound negative, and I don't mean that at all, because the reason I am so anxious is because I want to use this stuff. I want to be buying the latest, greatest OpenAI thing that Jony Ive has designed. Of course I want that. But I want to be able to use it. I don't want it to become an object that sits on my shelf because it happens to be nice, but that's it. I don't want the Humane AI pin again. And, I don't feel that the splash that went with that around the inaccessibility story of Humane AI pin made any dent in any way to any future conversation about accessibility. That's my concern.
And it's still the case that I've got a Stream Deck here that I need to get someone else to set up because the software is inaccessible. Some companies just don't listen.
Logitech keyboards.
Yep.
Rode. The RODE, the audio company that produces the Rodecaster Pro and other devices, brilliant devices, inaccessible.
Yeah.
And, it's not good enough. It just is not good enough. But, when you see the number of devices, like you say, you kind of hope that Apple will develop a mixing console for audio editing. You think, well, at least it'll be accessible, And instead of leading the way in some way that I thought it would encourage others. It has some, but others, it's just gone by. And I do not understand it. But I guess that's because we're so close to it. The reality is on the outside. I think back to the days of when I was growing up with, low vision. How much did I think about Braille and access to Braille and access to computers with screen readers? Hardly at all.
But then again, you're not $1 billion company that should know about
Damn
this
right
stuff.
I'm not. 50 cents in my pocket, and that's it. Look, we're out of time for today, but this has been really fun. I've enjoyed this, and I hope you have too. We'll be back on Monday with your feedback and plenty more. Catch you then. Thanks, Shaun. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.